A cold wind whispered through the empty streets while flashing lights danced on peeling paint and cracked asphalt. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder, echoing across broken windows and rusted fences. A lone figure, a girl no more than 9 or 10, stood trembling beneath a single flickering street lamp. Her dirty dress clung to her small frame, knees scraped raw, and her big brown eyes glistened with tears. In her tiny hand she clutched a scrap of cloth, knuckles white. As the patrol car doors screeched open, 2 officers stepped out onto the pavement. Their boots clicked against the concrete as they approached her, badges glinting in the unforgiving glare of the lamp. One officer, tall and broad, knelt gently beside her. "Hey there, kiddo," he said softly. "You okay?" She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "My mom, please, my mom is in the shed, she's in there." At her words, the officers exchanged a tense glance. Behind them loomed an old wooden shed, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Paint peeled in long strips, and the latch dangled, loose. The second officer, younger and leaner, approached the shed with caution. In his gloved hand he lifted a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness to illuminate faded wood grain and long-forgotten cobwebs. His voice was steady but strained. "Stay back, little one, we'll check it out." The girl nodded, stepping aside but never taking her eyes off the door as it creaked open. Inside, the beam of the flashlight revealed something that made both officers freeze. Their training told them to expect the worst, but nothing had prepared them for this. A woman lay curled on the cold floor, her face pale as moonlight, her hair matted and dark. She was bound, wrists red where coarse rope had cut into her skin. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. As the officers moved closer, hearts pounding, the woman's eyes fluttered open. Terror shone in her gaze, then confusion, then relief as she recognized the little girl pressing her face against the door. "Mommy," the girl called, voice cracking. "Mommy, I'm here." The woman tried to speak, but the rope stilled her voice. The tall officer knelt beside her, cutting the ropes with a small knife. The younger officer shone his light around the room, uncovering more. Another figure, unconscious on the ground. Crumpled papers scattered across the floor. A broken bottle, a single red rose snapped in half. The woman sat up, pulling the girl into her arms. She whispered hoarsely, "I tried to keep you safe. I'm so sorry." The girl clung to her mother, sobbing. The officers moved to secure the scene, one calling for backup and paramedics. Flashing lights turned the night sky into a strobing halo as voices crackled over radios. Everything about that moment felt surreal. The cold rush of air, the weight of fear, the fierce love of a daughter for her mother. But the danger was not over. As the mother and daughter were led away from the shed, a dark shape slipped behind the crumbling barn near the property's edge. The officers didn't see it, but they would soon. Because this nightmare was far from finished. When backup arrived, the area was sealed off with yellow tape, and investigators combed every inch of the shed and surrounding property. The unconscious figure was identified as Greg Morrison, a man known to local authorities for prior arrests involving illegal confinement and assault. He was taken into custody once stabilized. The woman, whose name was Elena, remained hospitalized for several days, her physical injuries only part of the story she carried. The little girl, named Lily, stayed by her mother's side, clutching, her hand with a grip so firm it belied her size. Nurses whispered of the bond between them, unbreakable even through torment. Officers interviewed Elena, who through cracked lips and tear-filled eyes explained what had happened. They had been living quietly on the outskirts of town, trying to rebuild their life after fleeing an abusive household. Elena had taken jobs, cleaning houses, working odd shifts, and doing what she could to provide for Lily. But then Greg had appeared. He was her ex, the man she had run from. He had tracked them down, convinced she belonged to him. One evening, while Lily was away at school, he had broken into their home, dragged Elena to the shed, and locked her in. He had waited until Lily came home, pretending Elena had left. Days passed. The neighbors, few and far between, thought nothing of it. Greg would leave food by the door, keeping Elena alive but broken. Lily had believed something was wrong and began her own search around the property, finally finding her mother inside the shed. The community reacted with a mix of horror and sympathy. News outlets ran headlines like, "Bravery of a Child Saves Her Mother and Shed of Secrets, a Town's Hidden Nightmare." Donations poured in. Local businesses offered support. A nearby women's shelter extended a hand to both Elena and Lily. Still, healing was not easy. Elena suffered from trauma-induced anxiety and frequent nightmares. Lily, though seemingly resilient, had begun waking in the middle of the night crying out for her mother. They entered therapy together, sessions filled with quiet tears and brave smiles. Months passed. Elena found a job working as a receptionist at a dental clinic, and Lily returned to school. Her teachers reported that she was quieter than most, but kind and quick to help others. One classmate mentioned that Lily never let her backpack out of her sight. Inside was a small photo of her and her mom taken after the rescue. One day, Elena was called into Lily's school. The principal and a child psychologist gently explained that Lily had drawn a picture that concerned them. It showed the shed, her mother bound inside, and a shadowy figure in the background. But what startled them most was the second shadow, another person hidden, watching it all happen. Investigators re-examined the case. Had there been someone else involved? Could Greg have had help? The idea chilled Elena to her core. She remembered hearing whispers outside the shed, but she had dismissed them as tricks her mind played on her. A new search began. The property was explored again, and this time, they found something. Behind the barn, in a collapsed storm drain, officers discovered a small journal. Pages were smudged, but several entries were legible. They spoke of a man named Carl, someone who had been following Elena and Greg for months, watching from afar. He had written of their routines, their fears, and something far darker, intentions that suggested he too had planned to harm Elena. Carl was found in a nearby town, working under an alias. He had rented a motel room with soundproof walls and maps on the walls marked with pins. Elena's work, Lily's school, routes they took. It was clear Greg hadn't acted alone. Carl had been the observer, the one who made sure no one interfered. He was arrested without incident. During questioning, Carl admitted to watching them but denied direct involvement. However, digital evidence from his laptop showed he had sent Greg messages encouraging him to act. He called it an experiment in power. The courtroom was filled when Carl was tried alongside Greg. Elena testified, her voice shaking but strong. Lily sat in the front row, holding a small stuffed bear her mother had sewn for her in the shelter. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the room exhaled as one. After the trial, Elena and Lily were offered a fresh start in another town. They moved into a small yellow house with a white picket fence and a cherry tree in the front yard. For the first time in years, they felt safe. Elena volunteered at a support center, helping women escape abuse. She told her story only when asked, but her presence alone gave hope. Lily, now a preteen, joined a local theater group. She found joy in telling stories that ended in light, not darkness. One spring morning as they walked to school, Lily looked up at her mother and asked, "Do you think the bad dreams will ever stop?" Elena smiled, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. "I think they get quieter, and I think the good dreams start talking louder." Lily nodded and took her mother's hand. They walked down the sidewalk, sunlight dappling their path through the leaves. The past still echoed, but it no longer screamed. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. Because sometimes the scariest stories don't end when the shed door opens. They end when the people inside find the strength to step into the light and stay there.